This is the story of Rebecca Nurse by Emily Carolyn. Background on Rebecca. Rebecca Nurse is the daughter of William and Joanna Town. Rebecca was born in Great Yarmouth, England in 1621. Her family includes her older sister Susan, her two younger sisters Mary and Sarah, who are also accused of witchcraft, and her three brothers, Edmund, Jacob, and Joseph, who settled in Salem Village in 1640. In 1645, at the age of 24, she married Francis Nurse, who was also born in England. Her husband was a tray-maker by trade and made many household items. Due to the rarity of such household items, Francis was considered rich. Together, Rebecca and Francis had 8 children, 4 girls and 4 boys. Rebecca frequently went to church, and her family was well respected in Salem Village. Most everyone liked her, so she was one of the first unlikely persons to be accused of witchcraft. Background on the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials occurred in colonial Massachusetts between 1692 and 1693. The Salem witch trials were a series of hearings before local judges, followed by county court trials to persecute people accused of witchcraft in Essex, Suffolk, and Middlesex counties of colonial Massachusetts. The hearings began in February of 1692 and ended in May of 1693. Despite being known as the Salem witch trials, the hearings in 1692 were conducted in a series of towns across the Providence. Salem Village, Ipswich, Andover, and Salem Town were the main places. Over 150 people were arrested and imprisoned, with even more accused but never questioned by authorities. Out of all the people that were accused, 14 women and 5 men were hung. Only one execution was not by hanging. Giles Corey, an 8-year-old farmer from the southeast end of Salem, refused to enter a plea. The law provided for the application of a form of torture in which the victim was slowly crushed by piling rocks on him or her. After 2 days of excruciating pain, Corey died without entering a plea. Rebecca Nurse. At 71 years old, Rebecca Nurse was accused of witchcraft. She didn't make for a likely witch. She was a kind and generous lady that was well liked by the community. She was first accused by Ann Putnam. The Nurse family had been involved in several land disputes with the Putnams, which could have caused hatred toward Rebecca. Then, other young girls said Rebecca would float into their room at night, pinching and torturing them. When Rebecca was notified about this, she responded,
"What sin hath God found in me, unrepeated of that he should lay such an affliction upon me in my old age?"
March 23, 1692, a warrant was issued for her arrest. Rebecca was indicted on June 2, 1692, and subjected to a physical examination by a group of women. The majority of the women believed that a mark on Rebecca's skin was a sign of the devil, although 2 women disagreed and said the mark was due to natural causes. Rebecca asked for a new group of women to examine her before she was brought to trial, but this request was denied. Rebecca Nurse was tried on June 29, 1692. Her accusers included 4 young girls, Reverend Paris, and several members of the Putnam family. Rebecca's son, son-in-law, and daughter-in-law spoke in her defense. More than 40 of Rebecca's neighbors signed a petition commending her innocence. In her defense, she also said,
"I can say before my eternal Father, I am innocent, and God will clear my innocence."
The jury first convicted Rebecca not guilty, but when the jurors announced the verdict, the afflicted girl screamed and began to roll on the floor. The courtroom was in an uproar. Because of this, the judges asked the jury to reconsider. Rebecca was now found guilty. On July 19, 1692, Rebecca was hung on Gallows Hill. Tradition says that at midnight, Francis Nurse and his children secretly removed Rebecca's body and carried her back to her homestead, where they buried her in an unmarked grave. How the Salem witch trials ended. The Salem witch trials ended simply because the colony became exhausted with the witchcraft frenzy, and learned persons were speaking against the validity of spectral evidence being used in court. When trials resumed, this former evidence was disallowed and proof was insufficient to commend any other accused. 10 out of the 12 people hanged came from the Salem Village area, dying rather than confessing to what they had not done. In January 1693, the horror of the Salem witch trials was finally over. Life after the trials. The aftermath of the Salem witch trials was severe. Even with the witch trials over, many accused witches were still in jail because they couldn't pay for their release. The new law stated that prisoners had to pay for their food before being released. They would stay in jail until they could pay. Those who were convicted of witchcraft had their property confiscated by the government. This left many people without money and some a home. Also, because of the trials, houses and fields were left unattended and the planting season was interrupted. The Salem Village politics also changed. Essex County declared that the Salem Village Committee neglected its duties and ordered for a new election on January 15, 1693. The Rebecca Nurse Homestead. The Rebecca Nurse Homestead is located at 149 Pine Street in Danvers, Massachusetts. It includes 25 acres of fields, pastures, and woods. A long dirt road leads to the unmissable ancient red salt box style colonial. Rebecca's house is situated on a small hill near the midpoint of the property. In 1678, the owner, James Allen, began renting the property to Francis Nurse. As you travel down the short dirt road, visitors can see where Rebecca Nurse once lived, went to church, and did her daily chores. The homestead was built in 1678 while adding 4 additions between 1720 and 1920. As you step into the house, you first see the dining area. At the table, there are only 2 chairs. Rebecca and Francis were the only 2 in the family who could sit there. The 8 children would stand alongside the table, usually in descending age order, starting at Francis. This led to the younger children being a little unhealthier than the older children because they weren't getting the nutrients they needed. Stepping through the doorway into another room takes you into a bedroom, kitchen, and workplace. Here, all the children would sleep, most times 4 to a bed, unless the child was too young and slept with the parents. Also in this room, Rebecca would cook for the family in her large brick fireplace. Another use for this room was for weaving. Going up the narrow staircase leads you into Rebecca and Francis's bedroom. The bedroom includes a large fireplace and a cradle for their youngest child. Just across the dirt road is a church house where people would gather for 6-hour masses on Sundays. In the church, the seating depended on your rank in society. The children and servants sat upstairs while the adults sat downstairs and the wealthy sat in the front row. When Francis Nurse died in 1695, his house came into possession of his son Samuel. After the house was passed down to generations of the Nurse family, ironically, it was bought by Phineas Putnam in 1784. The property stayed in the Putnam family until 1908. The Rebecca Nurse Homestead is one of the only remaining homesteads where there has been no modernization done to it. For this reason, it is considered one of the most accurate portraits of what life was like back in the 1600s. The graveyard. The ancient Nurse family graveyard is surrounded by towering pine trees set back on the west side of the property. Numerous generations of families are buried here, many gravestones unmarked. It is undoubtedly here that Rebecca Nurse was secretly buried by her family after she was hung on Gallows Hill. On July 30th, 1885, the Nurse family dedicated the Granite Memorial in honor of Rebecca's memory. In 1892, an additional monument was built to honor the 40 neighbors who in 1692 signed a petition in support of Rebecca. No one died as a convicted witch in America after the Salem witch trials were over. It was also the last of the religious witch hunts. Salem Village separated from Salem Town in 1752 and became the town of Danvers. The separation didn't wipe away the history of the witch trials from its past. For over 300 years, historians, socialists, psychologists, and others continue to research and write about the horror of the trials. The trials continue to serve as a reminder of how politics, family, religion, economics, and the imaginations of people can yield tragic consequences, just like the story of Rebecca Nurse.